Well, I got my magnet on a stick. Wish me luck. On. And it's coming out. Next time, I'm going to block those holes. Hi guys, welcome back. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put the intake manifold onto the engine. I'm going to show you how I do it, which may or may not be the way that you do it, or may not be the, the quote-unquote correct way to do it, but it's the way I've learned to do it after making a lot of mistakes. I even made a kind of a doozy, as you saw on this one. We learn a bit every time we do it. So generally speaking, I'm going to go through step by step what I do. And if you have any tips or suggestions on how to do it better or more properly, or how you do it, I'd really like to hear in the comments. So anyways, I'm going to go through the steps and we'll go from there. Thanks. So the first thing that I do is I always make sure everything is clean. And by clean, I mean all my surfaces are perfectly clean. So I go around with a razor blade after I've taken off the manifold, taken off the gasket. Gasket basically falls off. And I go around and I scrape everything with a razor blade on both the heads, the china walls, and also on the intake manifold, obviously. So I clean everything up as clean as it can be. And then I hit it with some kind of a solvent, like a Varsol or even a brake cleaner or something. That way it gets everything like squeaky clean. Because we want the RTV to stick. And we want everything, the RTV to stick, the gaskets to seal. And if you've got a big hunk of gunk here from the old gasket, the new gasket's not going to seal and you're going to get a vacuum leak. Or if you do it here, what will happen is it's not going to seal and you're going to get coolant going into your engine, which is not cool. The other thing I do is I make sure all of my threads are clean. So all of the bolts, I'm using the original bolts from this engine. What I did was I sandblasted them all, mainly because I wanted to paint them to make them look pretty. But I sandblasted them, and then I ran a dye over the threads to make sure that all the gunk is out of the threads and that the threads are straight and clean and will work. So I do that, A, to make life easier for me, and B, it also will help ensure that the torque spec is correct. Then I go through all of these holes here with a tap, and I tap them out. A couple different reasons. Again, just to make things clear, make sure everything goes together nice. And then also you need to find out on certain engines, these may not be blind holes. So for example, this engine, all of these holes here on both sides go through to the valley. So that means there's a lot of oil that splashes up around here when the engine's running, a lot more than you would think. So oil will seep up the threads and will come out on top of the intake. That's why on this particular engine they recommend you put some sealant RTV on the threads before you torque them down, which I will do. The outside four, these seem to be blind holes, so you probably don't need sealant. I will put it in there, just, why not? But the other thing you have to be careful of on some engines, these holes will actually go into the water jacket, and if you don't seal it, you'll have coolant coming up the threads, into the engine and outside the engine. Another thing I would recommend is drain holes, like that and that. That's actually for the distributor. Put a rag or something over those before you start putting threads in these holes. Otherwise you might, drop the tap down one of those holes and have to go to the hardware store, buy a magnet on a stick and fish it out. Or worst case scenario, you got to pull your motor all apart to get it out. That wouldn't be fun. So anyways, that's what I do first. Before I put the gaskets on, I got these gaskets. Interesting, the rear coolant ports are blocked off. So that's from the factory. They got a little hole there. If anybody knows why that is, let me know. It just seems strange because there is coolant ports in the head and in the manifold. But I don't know why they blocked them off and just put a little hole. I'm sure there's a reason. Anyways, I got this Velcro gasket set. It comes with both sides, the gaskets on either side. I think that is one of these is for the distributor. Not sure what the other one's for. It also came with a little small Velcro gray RTV silicone. That's nowhere near enough, or it might be just enough. So I'm just going to save that for later, for special, whatever. What I use is this stuff. I've used different types of Permatex. I've used the Ultra Blue. I've used the black. This is the first time I've used the red. This is a high temperature one. It goes up to 650 degrees Fahrenheit, which is going to be more than hot enough for this engine. Now, one thing about RTV sealants is they don't like gasoline. So they're okay with oil, but they're not good with gas. So when I put this on, I do the China walls. I also do around the water ports, but I don't do around the intakes because there is theoretically gasoline or gas air mixture going through there. So I don't want to have this stuff, disintegrate and go through my combustion chamber. I also put this not just on the block and the heads, I also put this on the underside of the manifold, especially on the China wall side. I do that because in my Gremlin, when I put the first intake manifold on it, I found that the gap between the manifold and the rear China wall was like, I don't know, about almost a half an inch anyways. So I put my usual bead along the back, not on the manifold, dropped the manifold on, and when I ran it, I had a terrible oil leak from the back of the engine. I thought that my rear main seal had gone. So I was ready to pull the motor out and tear it all apart and redo the rear main seal for a second time. Turned out all it was oil. It's just dripping down there, and it was quite a drip, like quite a lot more oil than you would think will come out of there from the valley here. So that's why I do both the manifold and the heads and the block. Also, putting a bit of RTV sealant around here also helps keep the manifold, or the gasket, in place while you drop the manifold. The reason is, you want your holes lined up. When you drop the manifold, you really just want to do it one fell swoop, just once down, and have everything line up. You don't want to have to start moving it around. So when you start moving around, that's when you're going to get problems. So anyways, that's step 2. So step 1, obviously, clean everything. Step 2, RTV sealant on everything. And then we'll move on to step 3. So I have my RTV on the manifold where I want it. And a good bead on the China walls. Again, I don't have too much around there because I don't want to scoosh in and block the coolant. Another thing I noticed, this little thing, I put this in here. That plugs, that's where my oil pressure sensor goes. So I obviously don't want the RTV squooshing out and blocking that. So I put that little plug in there just to keep things safe. So now it's time to drop the manifold. Okay, so let's put the gaskets on. Now these marked this side up. I don't know if you can see that, but it does say this side up. And this says rear. So I know that goes there and that goes there. So let's line up. Again, lining up the holes. I should have probably done this when it was dry, just to make sure everything lines up. It does, luckily, but I've not always been so lucky. Alright, that lines up. That lines up. Alright, now for the, this always makes me nervous doing this. Alright, so let's see if we can do this. See if we can do this just once. Okay. Okay. It may have worked. You'll notice, oh, supposed to put RTV on the threads. Sorry, I was going to say, you'll notice that I'm not using washers. I did some research, and research seemed to indicate they weren't really necessary, but if any of you know better, let me know. I'm not opposed to taking the bolts out one at a time and cleaning them, tapping out the threads, and then putting washers on. And plus, you know what? Washer wouldn't even fit there. So there were no washers on this when I took it apart. So these are going in nicely. All right, I'll get that done. So I got all the bolts in, just finger tight basically. I haven't even put a socket on them or anything, so they're just in, just finger tight. So the next thing is torquing them down. So everybody torques cylinder heads down. Everybody torques, you know, your flywheel to your flex plate to your torque converter bolts. Everybody's fussy about that, but a lot of people just, you know, just brief these down to whatever. I found that, or I'm of the belief that it's better to torque them down properly and evenly in the right sequence. So say for example, I have these, you know, these four down to like, you know, 100 foot-pounds, and these down to like, you know, 30 or 20 or whatever. Uneven is going to be, again, more likely to get leaks, either vacuum or coolant, which you don't want. So this is, I don't know if you can see that or not, but this is the torque sequence for this particular manifold on this particular engine. So basically, I'm going to say you go around in circles, but in this case, that's number 1. Then I go to number 2, then 3, then 4, and 5, and so on. So I got to get these down to 35 foot-pounds. And I'm not going to go right from nothing. Like right now, I don't know how many foot-pounds is my fingers do, maybe 1. I don't know. I'm going to do this in 2 steps. Some people do it in 3 steps. You can do whatever you want. So I'm probably going to take it down to about between 15 and 20. Again, all evenly, whatever I can look at, whatever I can see on my torque wrench. Take it down to like 15 or 20, and then take it again, go through, start over again, and take it up to 35. So the torque wrench I'm using is the old-fashioned, this kind. I don't know what your thoughts are or beliefs on these. It's the one I have. The other one I have is like, you know, 6 feet long. It's for wheel nuts and things going over 100 foot-pounds. This one's good because you do have smaller amounts. You know, I could take it to 10 pounds or 15 pounds and I can actually see that. 20 is actually really easy to see. So what I'll probably do is take it down to 20. And then what I'm going to do to make life easier is I'll probably put a piece of tape up to the 35 mark so that I just take it to the edge of the tape. But 20 I can see quite easily. So I'm going to put my piece of paper this way because that way I won't lose it. I probably will. I'll probably end up taping it. Anyways, so number 1, I use a long socket. I may need an extension. No, I won't need an extension. So I'm just going to put this on. I have the right size socket. Yeah, I do. Okay, so take this to 20. Nope. And that's 20 foot-pounds. Okay, so I'll go around and do the rest of them. Then I'll show you what I mean about the tape on the torque wrench, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this is what I did with the torque wrench. I don't know if you can see that or if... So I have this green tape at 35. So 35 doesn't show up that easily, especially with my eyesight. So I put this tape here, so I know I take the needle to the edge of the tape to get my 35 foot-pounds. Right. 35 foot-pounds. It's now torqued down to 35 foot-pounds. So I do have some RTV squooshing out in different areas. So you can either wipe that off, and I usually just wipe it off with my finger, which isn't the best probably. But what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to wait until it sets up, completely cures. Then I'm going to take a razor blade and then just cut it along the edge to see if I can get a nice cleaner look rather than just squooshed out RTV everywhere. I did squoosh it out at the back there because... well, two reasons. One, I'm paranoid about a leak, so I kind of squooshed it all in. And two, I dropped a tool back there, and when I went to grab it, I got it all over my hands anyway. You will get RTV all over your hands when you do this. So a note about torquing. Interesting thing is, for example, I think this was 3 and this was 4 on the sequence. As soon as I tightened this down, even to 20, this, you could see, became really, really loose. And when I put this down to 35, you could tell this was then hand tight. So as soon as you tighten this down, this seemed to loosen off, obviously, which makes sense because you're pushing the manifold down. So equal torque is probably more important than the actual torque setting. So whether I had torqued this down to 32 or 38, probably wouldn't make as much difference as them all being equal. It's the same with the wheels. The most important things when torquing wheels to torque them all to the same setting. That is as important or more important than what setting you're torquing them to. So anyway, the manifold is on. The next step is going to be putting on my TBI unit. You know, all the little things that are taped up here, the EGR, stuff like that. The thermostat and so on. So I got to do all that. And the main reason I did this first is I've got these oil lines here, or sorry, fuel lines. This is my feed line from the fuel pump. This is my return line. So I have to put my TBI unit on first to know how I'm going to route my lines and everything like that, to not be in the way of, distributors and other things like that. So anyways, hope you got something out of this, and thanks for watching.